So I've just finished watching every single WWE pay-per-view from 2001, and honestly this year is way more complicated than people remember. There's some of the best stuff WWE ever produced, there's some booking decisions that make absolutely no sense looking back, and there are some moments that quietly set up well for the next generation of stars. Over the past few weeks, I've been breaking down every match of each pay-per-view in shorts, ranking them, rating them, giving my quick thoughts, and today we're stepping back and looking at the full story of WWE in 2001. What worked, what didn't, and how this chaotic year ended up laying the groundwork for the incredible years that followed. This is the Retrospective, Episode 1, WWE 2001. So like most years, the year started off with the Royal Rumble, and we started with the match between Kurt Angle and Triple H for the WWE Championship, which actually was more about Stephanie McMahon versus Trish Stratus than it was Triple H and Kurt Angle. But the match was pretty decent, though again Stephanie and Trish took the most of the attention away from the match. And of course the Royal Rumble is one of the best Royal Rumble matches to ever happen. I think it had everything that you could possibly need in a Royal Rumble. A good Iron Man in Kane, who had an absolutely fantastic performance, setting to at that point the elimination record. We had the hardcore moments as well as the big moments of people and the main people coming in. We had a cool stare down between Stone Cold and The Rock near the end, and Stone Cold was of course, in my opinion, the right winner for 2001, as he would go on to have a fantastic match at WrestleMania. No Way Out happened, and Triple H and Stone Cold had an absolute classic 3 Stages of Hell match, probably the best one that we've ever had. I do like how the match went from kind of technical, which you don't really expect when you think of Triple H and Stone Cold Steve Austin in the opening fall, to suddenly the switch to brawling as soon as we got to the second and third fall, which has obviously suited these two better than just a regular wrestling match. And it was a great finish. I was surprised that Stone Cold lost in the build to WrestleMania. Also on the card, as a bit of a side note, Jerry Lawler fighting for the right for the cat to get naked, I thought was very Jerry the King Lawler as far as his commentary and stuff goes. I thought that was quite funny, though he did end up losing that match. Moving on to WrestleMania, and the right to center sucked. They really did. I'm glad it's a group that didn't last very long, and you know, from their theme to how they just went about stuff, they were completely intolerable. Bradshaw and JBL seem like completely different people until they speak. It's very weird how that... I mean, I know that's kind of the whole point, is that Bradshaw turned his whole life around and became JBL, but yeah, it's quite weird seeing it back then. Kane versus Raven versus Big Show was a really fun and enjoyable, silly, hardcore match. I feel like it's actually one of the better matches on the card just because of the enjoyability of it. Shane McMahon versus Mr. McMahon is also a fun match. Vince kind of showed that he was willing to do anything. He took some absolutely brutal hits to the head during the match. And of course we had the absolutely massive moment of the Linda pop, where the crowd went absolutely crazy for Linda McMahon. TLC 2 is an iconic match, definitely the best match on the show, probably the best match of the year overall. I would say that, I'd get out of all of them, out of all the matches in 2001, that probably tops my list. But yeah, it was one of the best Mania main events as well. It's definitely the best Rock versus Austin match in my opinion. It was a crazy heel turn at the end. It's kind of a shame it didn't work out the way it could have, but it made for one of the most iconic WrestleMania moments of all time. Moving on to Backlash, we saw Raven versus Rhyno, which was a brutal match for the Hardcore Championship, and one of the more, and again, tried to use silly but enjoyable moments. Seeing Rhyno gore into a trolley, I thought was a really cool spot. The Ultimate Submission match that Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit had might be one of the worst stipulations that I have ever seen. I don't like Iron Man matches as it is, let alone it being submission only. The Duchess of Queensberry rules match between Jericho and Regal I thought was bloody awful. Shane McMahon doing stupid shit like Shane McMahon does for, as we know now, the love of his father. I respect to him. It's a hell of a spot to take, jumping off the scaffolding onto the Big Show in the Last Man Standing match, but yeah, definitely not envious of him taking that bump. We also then move on to Judgment Day, where I don't know, I really started to really despise William Regal at this point. He was like opening every show and I just hated him. And as somebody who is also British like he is, I should probably be backing him up, but man, I couldn't stand him. We also saw Chris Benoit and Chris Jericho win Tag Team Turmoil, which would then lead to a Triple H's quad injury, which would take him out for the rest of the year. And it's like one of those big what if moments of how Triple H could have affected 2001 and more specifically the invasion angle. I do wonder whether he was supposed to defect to the alliance with Stephanie instead of Stone Cold being the one that did it instead, and it would kind of be Stone Cold versus Triple H would be the rivalry of 2001 through the invasion. But, you know, as I said, it's one of the biggest wrestling what-ifs, but I feel like Triple H would have been a massive star coming out of 2001, though he was a massive star anyway because of the magnitude of his return in 2002. Then going on to King of the Ring, Kurt Angle gets a ton of respect here. He wrestled 3 matches on that show, the King of the Ring semi-final and final, as well as an awesome match with Shane McMahon in a street fight, where obviously Shane McMahon took the glass spot where he landed straight on his head and then continued anyway. We also saw DDP. He didn't debut the Stalker gimmick here, but it was just after he had revealed it, and it was a really unique way to introduce somebody, but also very memorable at the time as well. And I do question how Austin versus Jericho versus Benoit ended up being a mediocre match considering the amount of talent that was in the ring at the time. So getting to Invasion, and it was a stacked show. There was many matches compared to usual. I noticed there was about 6 or 7 matches on each pay-per-view. This one had 10 to 11. But no, it was a really good show. I actually quite enjoyed the Invasion storyline. I know there was like a poor execution due to the lack of WCW megastars. But as a storyline, I actually really enjoyed it. I thought that Rob Van Dam benefited the most from the Invasion storyline. Booker T, he got over 2, but I was like, eventually, I felt like he should have been the person that benefited the most, as he was like the face of WCW coming into WWE. But no, it was a case of Rob Van Dam got really over. His match with Jeff Hardy, the hardcore match they had, was awesome. But yeah, the pop the old Stone Cold would get on the build up to Invasion on, I believe it was Raw or SmackDown. Leading up to the main match, I thought was honestly one of the best and loudest reactions I think we've had in WWE history. But overall, it was fine. We saw the defection of Stone Cold Steve Austin, which made a lot of sense. I assumed that maybe Triple H was supposed to be in that position, with Stephanie McMahon being the owner of the ECW part of the alliance, and maybe Triple H was supposed to be the face of WCW and ECW, and then you had Stone Cold as the face of WWF, but obviously they had to pivot that due to the quad injury of Triple H. But yeah, I thought that it would have probably made that thing a little bit more bearable if they had Triple H defect with Stephanie rather than Stone Cold. But yeah, it was fine overall. We get to SummerSlam. One of my highlights of the SummerSlam card was Kane and The Undertaker versus DDP and Kanyon. It's one of my favourite steel cage matches, just with the way it works out, the way the story ties so much into it, with them wanting Kanyon to leave, so that it leaves DDP in the cage with Kane and The Undertaker. I thought it worked out really well. There was 2 massive main events. The Austin and Angle match, though, on paper should have been like one of the better matches of the year, with 3 separate ref bumps and ending in disqualification. It was an awful ending to what was a great match, but they will rectify that on the next pay-per-view. But it was an okay SummerSlam. There were stronger pay-per-views throughout the year, in my opinion, but yeah, I thought that the Invasion angle starting off, I thought was really good. I think it did make stars in Booker T and Rob Van Dam, but Rob Van Dam definitely, I would say, benefited the most of the Invasion angle. Moving on to Unforgiven, and Perry Saturn and Moppy was a weird storyline. The fact that he was in love with a mop and he left Terry Reynolds for a mop, I thought was interesting. I heard that this might have been a punishment storyline, which wouldn't surprise me, to be fair. We saw Christian start his singles run as he betrayed Edge, and yeah, I love Christian's singles theme, the At Last theme that he had, and also Edge's Rob Zombie theme was good too. But giving the IC Championship to Christian seemed to show some kind of investment in Christian. Sadly, that wouldn't be the case. They would take the title off him a month later, and there wouldn't really be any investment in Christian for like another 10 years until we got around to 2011. I was becoming more convinced at that point that Rob Van Dam might be the best in-ring wrestler in 2001 in WWE. He was having banger matches with the likes of Jeff Hardy, Chris Jericho, and more at this point. There was a huge pop for Kurt Angle winning the WWE Championship, but as the American Hero gimmick, begetting the biggest win of the year in 2001 in September, which, you know, American Hero, September 2001, I get it to a degree, and it was a great match as well with Stone Cold Steve Austin. It was one of the highlight matches of the year, I would have said. On to No Mercy. No Mercy saw a revolutionary match come into the forte as we saw the first lingerie match between Stacy Keibler and Tori Wilson. And yeah, I mean, like, revolutionary is the only way I could really describe it. Rock versus Jericho, WWE versus WWE for the WCW Championship made a lot of no sense. But having Chris Jericho beat The Rock seemed to set up well for his big win at Vengeance and was a huge win for Jericho at the time. Survivor Series, I would probably say, was, I mean, obviously it was the most important pay-per-view of the whole Invasion angle, though it didn't produce any great matches. It did call to one of the bigger moments. But we saw Jeff Hardy become like an absolute fool. He would be set to win the match, be it in a steel cage tag team unification match between the Dudleys and the Hardys, bringing together tag team championships, and he would try and put Devon through a table by jumping off the top, and he would go through himself, though it was a satisfying table break. I liked the idea of the immunity battle royal, considering the circumstances of one of the companies was going to come to an end on that night. Having an immunity thing where you couldn't get fired for a year was very smart, and I like the fact that Test won it, and we'll get to Test a bit later on. Jazz debuting I thought was really good. She really should be in the Hall of Fame, as she was a big impact player for the women's division in this time. She had a really cool debut, and Paul Heyman really put her over from the get-go when she first appeared. And Team WWE versus Team Alliance was a really fun Survivor Series match. I feel like it's one of the ones that kind of gets forgotten about because it's put in the same box as the failing Invasion angle, but as a match it's really fun. In the moment, I can imagine that Kurt Angle costing Stone Cold the match was really awesome, though Kurt Angle's play as a last-minute defect to the Alliance really made no sense. You know, he just had a massive win the pay-per-view before in September, winning the WWE Championship, as I've said. To then have him defect and be a heel, I thought made no sense, as the fans wouldn't really want to boo Kurt Angle at this point, especially as he had a fantastic year. And I think at the time as well, he was PWI's #1 wrestler of the year. So again, he was kind of in a position where no one was going to boo him. They had him defect anyway for no reason at all. Maybe having someone like a Rhyno or a Test at that point would have been a really good position and put them in a position on the card going forward that would have been higher than they actually got to. Test and Rhyno both kind of had a ceiling on them going forward, and they only really got to a mid-card championship, and that was it. They never really challenged for the world championships ever again, which was a massive shame, as I was a big fan of Rhyno and Test. But yeah, I know, as I said, Kurt Angle defecting was kind of weird, but it set up really well for him, costing the Alliance the match very well, put him over massively before, obviously, we saw the titles come together at Vengeance. But yeah, I said, as a overall finish from Invasion all the way to Survivor Series, I did enjoy it. I thought some of the pay-per-view matches, though we didn't get like the dream matches we could have got involving Hogan and Sting and Goldberg and stuff like that, didn't work out. I enjoyed it for the most part. Obviously, we would see Hogan, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash debut in February, and this finished in November, so maybe they could have had it play out a little bit longer, maybe to WrestleMania, but it was fine for what it was. So I enjoyed it overall, and yeah, as a kind of, it kind of would have made sense to have the year end with a final Invasion kind of storyline pay-per-view, but Survivor Series again is a good place. They had the traditional Survivor Series match, as I said, was one of the more underrated ones. So yeah. And the final pay-per-view of 2001 was Vengeance. And yeah, there was a potential in the opening match that I saw with Test and Christian as a tag team. I thought they would have been cool as a team. I know they were part of the Un-Americans at one point, but the team within that faction was, I believe, Lance Storm and William Regal, and then Lance Storm and Christian. But yeah, I would have liked to see Test and Christian team up more regularly. So, with The Undertaker, I like the American Badass character that he had for a while. I actually prefer it to Deadman Taker, which I know is quite controversial. But I like even more the demanding respect, hurting people, badass Taker, you know, when he cut his hair now in the end of 2001 into 2002. I like the fact that he kind of elevated Rob Van Dam and the Hardys within that time, and obviously him challenging and winning the Hardcore Championship might be seen as a relegation on this show. For me, it's quite the opposite. I saw it as him elevating the championship, and of course Rob Van Dam as well, after such a successful year for him. So yeah, I see it more as a good thing than I see a bad thing. I like the idea of not going with the straight WWE champion versus WCW champion to make the undisputed champion. I like the fact that having 4 men within the kind of mini tournament thing that they did, it makes it more unpredictable in the moment and makes it a better watch overall. Speaking of those matches, Angle versus Austin was not a great match and not the match I was hoping it was going to be. Like, Angle dominated the match. It was like 80% of the match was Angle, 20% was Austin, and yet Austin got the win. I really didn't like that case. Chris Jericho versus The Rock was much better, and yet this was a massive win for Chris Jericho. It was a shame that he never really got seen as the main event guy, as the guy in the company by that point, even though he held the title from Vengeance till WrestleMania, which is a pretty decent run. I'd probably say over 100 days, I think it was. But yeah, it's a big disappointment how it worked out overall. But yeah, I thought this was a huge win for Jericho and really cemented him as a main eventer in WWE. After watching every WWE pay-per-view from 2001 again, what stood out the most? That it wasn't just the moment, it was the transition. Angle emerged as one of the true pillars of the company at this point. Rob Van Dam arrived and was like a glimpse into WWE's future. And even when certain stars and storylines didn't quite reach the level that they seemed to be destined for, including the likes of Test and Rhyno, and at times Christian as well once he went singles, I thought they were going to be on the verge of something bigger, and the pieces didn't quite work out that I thought they were going to in the long term. But yeah, 2001 wasn't perfection, and it wasn't about perfection. It was about change. It was about rebuilding, redefining, and setting the tone for incredible years that would follow in 2002 and 2003. But looking back now, it feels less like an end of an era kind of year. It feels more like the beginning of the next era. But this has been episode 1 of the retrospective, and the journey, well, it has only just started.